Molbug, the Twitter episode today where Elon, for inexplicable reasons, made Twitter unusable or half usable. What's going on? Is this silly Zog Valley stupidity infecting him too? Why tech doing this? Why Twitter not working?
To be the king, you know, and a CEO is a king.
Yes.
To be the king of Tesla, the king of SpaceX, you know, in these things, you operate in the dark. And when you operate in the dark and no one sees your day-to-day, no one sees the thing you do, you don't affect the public, you don't see the public does not see you. So much of the success of such a king comes out of the people around him. You know, there's a learning curve with sort of being a public king, because with a public king, you have, you know, you're a patriot king, you're Bolingbroke's patriot king,
yes.
and you have to have an intuitive feel for your public, and you know, your power. It's always an alliance of monarchy and democracy. It's, you know, it's in the oligarchy, the aristocracy, that democracy is the most subdued, but the alliance of people and king is very necessary. You know, when you have a position like that of Elon, there's a lot of, you know, learning curve, but it's a different role. And, you know, I hope that he can step into it because the service is so important. It's been a tough learning curve. I feel, you know, what he's done with the blue checks is very silly and wrong.
Why you think so? Why you think about the blue checks?
Carlyle, my hero, Carlyle, you know, said this wonderful thing about slavery. He said, you can abolish the word slavery, but never the thing of slavery. You can't abolish the thing. We were talking before the show about you know, the maid who comes to clean my room in London.
The docile maid.
And it, you know, I thought about the nature of slavery, and there are many ways to define a slave society. But one of the simplest, you know, it's not about like sort of details of like work contract and so forth. For me, it's more about the separation between the service class and the servers and the serve. You can measure the social distance in like number of hops between the server and the served. One time, you know, in the 90s, I was living in San Francisco, and we had a cleaner who was actually a friend of a friend, you know, 2 hops away. That was very strange. And she was cleaning, and then my roommate began, you know, as they say, dating.
Yes.
He began dating the maid. But, you know, she was a member of her social class. It was a little awkward. It was a little strange, but, you know, I think it was good. And at least it sounded good. And when I heard it. And when I look at the distance between me and the maid, whether, you know, it's here or in California, me and the person who cleans my toilet, how many hops is that if it's just social connection?
Yes.
I would say I have a closer relationship to Putin. I have a closer relationship to Chairman Xi. I might have a closer relationship to Kim Jong-un.
Yes.
So, you know, and when you have this sort of separation between, it's the separation between the nobles and the ignobles that makes a slave society. You know, throughout history, this phenomenon has always existed. But, you know, there are people much socially closer to me who should be cleaning toilets but are not.
Yeah. Social and other kinds of separation between you and her. And I want to alert the audience to, I've been traveling Asia for last few months. And there's a lot of propaganda. We were talking this before show. There's a lot of propaganda that Tokyo, Hong Kong are these incredibly expensive places where there is, you know, you can't get a room, and if you do, it's going to be closet spaced, and everything's cramped and difficult and so on. And at least if you get a nice hotel anywhere in the Orient, Tokyo, Hong Kong, Bangkok, it's going to be, first of all, much more spacious than any equivalent would be in the whether United States or Europe. Much more square footage, for example. Second of all, the service you'll get, they truly respect money and such, and you will get lavish service from staff and so on. Whereas in the West, so my mother came to visit me. I posted about this. She refused to let me see the triads in Hong Kong, and we went to have dim sum crab dumpling instead. But on her way back, she stopped over for one day in a place in North Europe, and she told me, for not the airline, the hotel, everything else, in Europe and United States, there is a kind of not aristocratic disdain for money, but this kind of Yantelo, pseudo-socialist, groupist thing of trying to shove it in your face that we are going to treat you badly. And so even if she flies business class or whatever, they stop her, they make her take things out of her luggage because of extreme regulations, which would never happen in Asia and such. And I know this may be petty personal example, but in general, I think people ought to be aware of what a scam the Western world has become after 2 centuries, not of just political democracy, but social, cultural democracy. Bolbak, do you want to remark on this? You know what I'm leading at? It's just the living standard, the average, even middle-class person is so much less in the United States compared to the Orient. I don't know that people know this. Not to speak of South America, which is frequently shitted upon and spat upon by right-wing people online, and yet an engineer, a middle-class engineer in Colombia or Venezuela can live X times better, orders of magnitudes better than his equivalent in the United States or Europe. I don't know if you want to remark on what's happening on this. Yeah.
In hotel service, I note that now, they clean every 3 days. Here I am in London. My woman has to climb over me to get out of bed. I'm in a shoebox. London is this paradise of dark money and dark things. And it's a strange, they guilt trip you. They say, because of climate change, we will not clean your towels. Make special requests to clean your towels, you're sort of being, there's this sort of there's this great line, in Hippolyte Taine, he's writing about the Jacobins, and he's writing about defining deviancy down in the age of 1791, 1792, the really dark era of Jacobin rule. And he says, everyone, 9/10 of France, despises the Jacobins, but they're completely disunited. They can do nothing. And everyone feels that he is well governed so long as he himself is not being killed. And I look at these, countries, in London, you don't yet have the tents, the beggars.
Yes.
It's not a thing, it's lovely, but time will catch up. I mean, they're already, it's a human rights violation and so forth. And of course, these shadowy figures are trying to burn Paris as we speak. The French state is reacting, keeping them out of the only healthy part of Paris, and really of France. The only healthy part is the countryside and, the old cities, which are theme parks, and everything else is it's one kind of suburb, which is it's either Bugman suburb or barbarian suburb. And, neither of these things is a credit to France. And so, and especially I want to remark on a subject. I don't know how you feel about sumptuary laws.
Yes.
Laws regulating clothing because I feel that when I walk through the streets, I see, it's a sort of double whammy because these people are poor, physically they are sorry specimens. And then they drape these bodies, that they've neglected for decades, are draped in these shapeless clothes that 50 years ago not even a bum would wear these clothes.
I was talking to Mike Anton on this subject the other day, and he laughed at me because I said, DeSantis for all his posturing. In Florida, you go by side of highway, you often see obese woman in capri pants with a mulatto child in tow, and this is an eyesore. And if I was running president, I would seek to correct that, as you say, through sumptuary laws. And he remarked, BAP, for all of your sensible feelings and proposals, I don't think they would have much popularity with American people. But I agree with you as a campaign program, but I agree with you on this. Yeah.
No, he's thinking, this is old thinking, I love Anton, but he's a man of the last century. It's like, fundamentally, popularity only means something when the people are strong. When the people are weak, it should be they should sort of follow in reverence, because like one thing I say often, here I am in England, in London, and I say that England is less democratic than it was in the age of Mary Tudor. And why do I mean that? I mean that because democracy is nothing more than the formalization of the power of the mob. When the people are strong, like how many people are there in the United Kingdom? 70 million, 60 million, something like that.
Yeah.
And, 1 million determined people can do anything.
Yeah.
And there were anything, no force can resist them if they are truly determined. And there is a military force ready to shoot them can do a lot. But, truly determined people, even non-lethal riot police, can't do much.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the weakness of the mob. Whereas if you look at the London mob 500 years ago, they would have a rumor, some opinion. They would say, the Germans of the Steelyard are undercutting good Englishmen in the wool trade. So let us kill all the Germans in London. And they would proceed to do their best to do that. And, you can say it was an age with far more thumos,
Yes.
And please do not insult me by saying thumos. And there was far more thumos. How would you say, okay, let's go into ancient Greek, pronunciation. You wouldn't say thumos as though there was an omicron in there, would you?
It's not u, but it is, the upsilon is pronounced in the same way that the modern French u would be. So it would be thumos, like an umlaut type sound.
Like an umlaut. How do they know that was the original sound? Because in modern Greek, which I learned in Cyprus as a child, in modern Greek it's E. It's very much E.
In modern Greek, everything is E. In modern Greek, they took 5 or 6 or 7 different vowel sounds from ancient Greek and turned it into E. This particular sound, I don't know how it was reconstructed as the umlaut. I can look into it. But the heta, which in modern Greek, for example, is an E sound, they have from many sources, obvious ones, that it was an eh, for example, including that the way that sheep sound in Aristophanes and other plays, it's ba ba, whereas in modern Greek, it would be v, and they know that. But look, Moldbug, I don't mean to interrupt you. This is becoming long segment. I want to comment on what you just said because it feeds into what we are going to talk about on this show, and this matter of Elon doing what he's doing, and this matter of what happening in Tokyo and Hong Kong and so on versus United States and North Europe, you are told by people that the migrants are being let in because there are shadowy aristocratic secret forces who are, for cynical capitalist reasons, they want cheap labor, And you come to North Europe, and from everything I hear, you do not. Where is the cheap labor? You don't see that. Whereas in Japan and Hong Kong and Thailand, there is. These are ethno-nationalist countries, and there is cheap labor, and there is enormous respect for money, and much more so than in Europe. And this is a lie, I think, promoted for all kinds of reasons, but basically, you are getting ripped off. You are getting sheep sheared like a sheep no matter how much money you have or not. In United States and North Europe, where you have to imagine, Moldbug, in Tokyo, you can go to Business Central District and pay $70 a night for, yes, it's not huge hotel room, but it's something. Imagine doing that in New York. You can't even do that in bumfuck middle of nowhere, United States.
Yes, and in New York, your hotel room is cleaned by a slave. Like someone who is not socially connected to you at all. Whereas in Japan, actually, your hotel room. They don't really have Gastarbeiter, in Japan, right? They actually have work for Japanese people, and the simple policy. There's so many. I mean, the purpose of government is national greatness, which is the greatness of every person within the state. And let us take in Florida. You mentioned the fat woman with the mulatto child in the capri pants, right? First of all, this clothing is clothing for a child. It is demeaning. Either if you were a noble in a modern sumptuary law situation, if you were an adult noble and you wear clothes in a calculated way to adorn yourself, to show your self-actualization, because the mission of the noble is self-actualization, is to become amazing in a personal way, then you should wear whatever clothes you want as long as they are amazing. And if they are not amazing, it is fine, because the other nobles will laugh at you and you will not go out dressed in your sweatpants the next day. For the woman in the capri pants, it's very simple to say what she should be wearing. If you're unattractive and unwealthy,
burqa,
you should be wearing a uniform. A burqa is a kind of uniform. I don't care the kind of uniform, but you can do better than this. Children, uniforms. Children. There's no purpose in the distinction of clothing among children. They should all dress in the same way. They should be, like the last. I mean. School, the idea of school without uniforms, very new idea, very, very ridiculous idea. It's like the idea of educating boys and girls together is, of all the dumb ideas of the 20th century. It's like, I have never, my children are, my oldest is high school age. In high school, the problems with putting boys and girls together, are one thing. But even in elementary school, I watch these schools, I see these schools, boys and girls never play together. I mean, it's more
Well,
separate
imagine high school. I have a frog friend who lives Bermuda, which, as you know, is very nice place, and he's very concerned he's very concerned for I think his daughter is like 3 years old, but he knows that as soon as any daughter becomes 14 and goes to high school in Bermuda, it's 24/7 fuck party there. I'm sorry to be vulgar, but it's a terrible idea.
No, it's very negrous. Bermuda, it's more than just negrous. It's negrocious, but California is a little bit different. But yeah, the 24/7. You're a child as an ape becoming a man, and the teenager has a special position in becoming human in a way, and the idea that they should be behaving like little adults and having 24/7 fuck parties. If we may be crude, I guess we may be crude. It's absurd. It's like and
this is a vulgar show. Yeah.
It's a vulgar show. Well, but as nobles, vulgarity is our prerogative. We cannot be mistaken for the masses in any case, and so to be vulgar for us is mere art. But whereas for the fat woman in the capri pants, this woman should, especially being here in England, my thoughts turn to, there's a pair of books that I always recommend to people, sociology books. One of them, you may know, Theodore Dalrymple, old boomer, and
he's a good writer.
He's a good writer, and he's a prison psychologist and he wrote this book, Life at the Bottom, which is a set of essays about, the complete moral and physical corruption of the British lower classes.
Yes.
And these are white people mostly. Many of them of Irish descent, actually, and they're completely useless. They should be cleaning my hotel room, but they're so useless that we have to import dossiers from very strange Eastern countries, right? To clean, and meanwhile the native lower classes luxuriate in their tracksuits and their stinky weed and their video games, and they decay as human beings. They should be in the fields.
That's one of his most depressing. Yeah, sorry.
It's a very depressing book. And then the other book that I recommend is a book called The Classic Slum by someone named Robert Roberts, and he was writing in the 20s or 30s, I think, of the Edwardian slums he grew up. Maybe as late as the 40s this book is written. But it's before the Beveridge Report, it's before the dole, the welfare state, and all of this. And he's writing of the Edwardian poverty that he grew up with. And, all of these people, they're striving manfully to be decent. They wear what looks, you see pictures of these slums. Everyone is wearing what looks like formal attire.
Yes.
If they have a hole in their clothes, they patch it. If they have a hole in their shoe, They paint their foot with ink so it doesn't look like there's a hole. They're all striving upward. They're striving to grow, to perfect themselves, even though even though they're dirt poor and they have no safety net. They have no hammock to rest in.
Yeah. And
these people were given a hammock and they rotted instantly, and they rotted like bad fruit. And this is the absolute horror of the Beveridge Report, because the people behind the Beveridge Report, these Fabians, laborites, we shall build Jerusalem in England's green and pleasant land. What is this? That's Blake, right?
Yeah.
And they attempt to build Jerusalem, and they say, well, here are all these people who strive to be middle class. They're, covering the holes in their clothes. They're wearing blazers, even if they're working men. What is it that separates these people from the respectable middle classes? And their answer, fools that they were, was money. And so, that was the only difference. And it turns out, actually, that if you give these people money, it destroys them. If you let them pick the clothes they wear, they revel in ugliness. If you, there must be 10 million people in England, for whom the absolute best thing for themselves, for their worlds, would be hard labor in the fields. And, hard labor cleaning, something labor, and
What I disagree with you, Moldbug, is I think the same is true for the so-called British leadership in government now.
Yes.
But we can talk this next segment. I don't mean to interrupt you. It's just becoming quite a long segment.
Yeah, it's very long. I ramble on. But you see my point.
I do see your point. I see your point, and I want just to add, in closing, what you said about Theodore Dalrymple and the British lower classes. He has another amazing essay about his time as a doctor, I think, in Botswana, and about how wonderful his life was as a doctor in Botswana.
Rhodesia, I think. Actually Rhodesia.
It may have been Rhodesia. It's one of the two. But he, in saying that, is just, in closing, I want to remind audience of how much they're being lied to with propaganda about. First of all, again, East Asia, that Tokyo, Hong Kong and such, you will get a closet and you drop a newspaper on the street and it's worth $100,000. Everything's overpriced. It's high stress. It's the opposite is the truth. That's the United States and North Europe. Whereas in East Asia, supposedly a collectivist and they say somewhat egalitarian democratic place, it's the very opposite. Whatever social class or money you have, you get your quote-unquote money's worth. Whereas United States and Europe, it's a fully socialized, pseudo-communist place already. Furthermore, when right-wing people in particular attack Brazil, I commented on this today, it's completely false. Brazil, I had Frog Friend, who was completely convinced by the talking points on the right. Brazil is the unfortunate future of United States and Europe and of the civilized countries. We're all going to have favelas and this. And when he came to visit me in Rio, he was so pleasantly surprised. He said, this is amazing. The first world services work much better than the first world, and the supposed first world. And yes, there is diversity. There is also associated crime. But despite the diversity, there is a genteel acceptance of one's station in life. I'm not saying this to praise Brazil. It has huge problems, but the United States and Europe are in many cases far worse already. And I want to say this in closing because it ties into what we'll talk on next segment and we are going to talk on this show. The so-called traditional conservatives, the tradcons and such, and are selling people through this kind of reasoning about the evils of neoliberal capitalism that's destroying religion and community and so on. They're selling people a complete lie that's actually in agreement with the regime lies about this. I want to end segment now because we've gone a long time, but do you have anything to say in closing on that, or you want to save it maybe for next segment?
Yes, I would say that, I think the tradcons, there are many kinds of societies. There's nothing wrong with a certain kind of social stratification. It's like, what's needed is that, when you're importing people and you're importing labor, and especially, it is true what you say that it is actually, these countries have plenty of native labor. The real problem, well, they're doing two things. One is what they're importing is much more sinister than labor. I mean,
they're not importing labor. The Gulf states are that's what importing cheap labor.
That's what importing cheap labor looks like. Now, there are problems with the Gulf states. There's no more useless creature on earth than an Emirati. But you'll notice that the people who are importing labor and the people, the shadowy figures setting fires in the street in Paris, these people do not work. They do not serve just because, France controlled a third of Africa and then the third of Africa comes to France does not mean that you go to Paris and you were waited on hand and foot. You were carried in sedan chair, by swarthy figures. You're dressed by, and no, it's absolutely not.
You are that in ethno-nationalist Bangkok or even Tokyo, by the way. You are treated that way. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so, this idea that it's fine because we're importing all this help. They're not even help. They're occupiers. They're there for conquest, really. Yeah. And conquest and the Danegeld or what or as some call it, Gibbs. Yeah. And that's that's a sad truth. It's like I spoke with an English truck driver here recently, and the truck drivers. It's very hard. The truck drivers, when they come from France, they're fined personally if these invaders get aboard their trucks, and so they have to check, and they hope for calm weather, because in calm weather they don't invade by truck, they invade by boat. This is a new thing, the boat invasions. It's absolutely remarkable. It's surreal to watch this nation.
This is amazing, Moldbug.
Keeping up its funeral pyre, as someone once said. And all right, let us close the segment on a note of complete agreement.
We need smoke break. Yes, complete agreement. Very good. Yes. We'll be right back. Yes.